Someone is talking. Yeah.
All right. Who is that? Okay, I think we're good. So yeah, welcome to the working group of multi-tenancy. Today we don't really have much of an agenda, although I don't know if Quentin's here, but he sent the doc on the hierarchical labels. So I don't know if anyone has any comments there. And then also there was Tim's doc that went out on container isolation, which now I have to find the link for that too, which kind of relates to.
Yeah, hey Jess, for Tim's doc, I would propose we wait until next time to discuss it, to give people more time to digest it. I know I didn't have time to read it. I don't know if other people did or not, but.
Totally. Yeah, that makes sense. I'll add it to the announcements though, so that we know for next time.
Yes, excellent.
Yeah, and I think the labeling document that I sent out is also not in a good state for discussion yet. I need to do quite a lot more work on that before it has enough detail to discuss in meaningful way.
Okay. So yeah, I guess then, like, does anyone have anything to actually discuss today, or we could probably like end early? I don't know.
Oh, I probably should say hi because I haven't been before.
Oh, nice.
I'm Nick from Atlassian. I mainly coming because I'm already running multi-tenant clusters in production. So I just wanted to keep track of what's going on. I'm running both. At least I'm running a couple of I'm running a hard multi-tenancy cluster and a soft multi-tenancy cluster. So So if you want to know anything about what we're doing for reals, then I am happy to provide details.
Yeah, I mean, if we don't have any other agenda items, maybe do you want to take a couple minutes and tell us a little? Like last week, people kind of talked about a little bit about what they were using the existing multi-tenancy features for, how they were using them, and like what they thought was missing or how things could be improved. Do you, Jess, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just thought maybe, or we could put this on the stack and see if there's other agenda items, but it would be great if we have time to get a little more information, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. There was no agenda, so.
Okay. So Nick, can you talk a little bit about what you guys are doing?
Yeah, sure. So we're running two kinds of clusters at the moment. We're running an internal sort of PaaS cluster that is intended to be used for lots of different compute workloads inside Atlassian. Right now, most of that is builds, and so a fair chunk of the container builds that Atlassian is doing internally are now running on the cluster. It scales up. It scales up and down great. The multi-tenancy part we're using pod security policies. RBAC obviously. I guess most of what we're doing so far is done with pod security policies and that sort of isolation. And we do have some basic levels of network protection using both network policies and Calico policies. We found that the network policies aren't quite flexible enough yet, and we needed to use the Calico policies for a few things, especially in the other cluster. Those are the two main things. Because we're running in AWS, we've had to do a lot of network stuff to seal off the metadata service and things like that. And in the other cluster, the hard multi-tenancy one, I don't know if you've seen the Bitbucket, Atlassian's GitHub thing, provides a CI solution called Pipelines. That actually, all of the builds that run in that run inside a Kubernetes cluster that we provide. So that one is a hard multi-tenancy in as many senses of the word, given that we're running arbitrary code supplied by random people on the internet. We have all the usual fun with that, with people deciding that 5 minutes is enough time to do a profitable amount of Bitcoin mining, things like that. So that one we have really hard. We have much harder network policy mainly. We've actually found that to date, we've just turned on all of the available security stuff that we could. In the pod security policy, we're using, we're making sure we turn on the SecCom profiles, turning off privileged pods, all of the stuff that you would, all the sort of defaulty stuff that you would think of. It's, I mean, we haven't had any problems yet, but so I just sort of wanted to make sure I was keeping up with what was happening here. Sorry, I didn't. It's 6:10 in the morning here, and I didn't prepare very good notes. I apologize.
No, I thought that was pretty good. Maybe people have questions, but that was pretty thorough. Thanks.
Yeah, I was going to ask, and maybe you don't want to answer it now, but it'd be useful to understand what the biggest challenges were. It sounds like you got pretty far, but I guess there were some things that were more difficult than other things. Be interesting to dive into those at some point.
Yeah, I think sort of looking back over it, the thing that was the hardest was the network isolation stuff, because the ways in which the different layers of network isolation play together are not clear. One of the guys in the team who's actually done most of the work on that has written a real handy test harness for himself that I'm poking him to tidy up so that hopefully we could open source it. But it's just a small thing that lets you run a set of like network tests and say this traffic should be allowed, this traffic should be blocked between two namespaces, two pods, between whatever you can think of. It's really nice, and it's really useful for this sort of thing where in one cluster we need it to look one way, and in another cluster we need it to look another way. Sorry.
I was going to say, Nick, do you have? So I'm also in Australia. Do you have like a DSL or something? How do you configure that? I mean, is it all driven from code somehow?
So you mean the firewall, all the rules and all that sort of stuff?
Yes.
So right now we have a set of policy objects in YAML and Calico stuff. I think the Calico stuff is also, I can't remember how we configure that. Sorry, but yeah, it's all done on as part of the normal deployments. We have been doing sort of deployments on top of Kubernetes for a long time, sort of and we originally wanted to use Helm for all of the actual Kubernetes level config, but the issues with Tiller needing cluster admin level access and having to be accessible from everything and all that sort of stuff have meant that we haven't done that. So we have this horrifying Ansible thing that just templates out a whole bunch of YAML and then blats it at the cluster. So not ideal, but yeah, we've spent enough time on it now that it's hard to make the case for spending the technical effort to move to anything else. So we just got this big, templating engine thing in Ansible that throws a whole bunch of config at the cluster.
So just to be clear, I think the question might have been like for the tests that you run.
Oh, right. Sorry.
Like
yes.
How is that configured as opposed to the actual network policy stuff?
Yeah.
I actually meant the network policies, but the tests too.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I was wrong, but I'm interested in the other one now that I asked. Sorry.
Yeah. It's just some Python code that there's no DSL or anything. It's just a series of Python, just some Python code that runs tests by curling things effectively. It's not super sophisticated, but it's better. It was certainly better than the nothing we had before.
Nick, one other question that wasn't clear from your description. Do your multiple tenants, do they actually have API access to the clusters, or do they just have the ability to, submit a CI job or whatever?
So for the hard multi-tenancy one, they don't have API access to the clusters. The part of what we did was obviously stop the containers that are running from being able to get API access to the clusters. And so the containers that run in the pipelines clusters, they they can't talk to the API server at all, or to the kubelet, or to any of the Kubernetes infrastructure. As far as they're concerned, they're just running, and there's nothing they can do. They can get out to the internet, and that's it, pretty much. The other one, customers do have API access. Because it's soft multi-tenancy, we use RBAC to control what people can do. The way that we grant we set the RBAC role for users and for bots is users, we have a little tool called Kube Token that issues a 6-hour cert to a user, and based on membership in an LDAP group. And then the cert has a CN of the RBAC role, and so then that all works. And for bots and stuff, it's just we show people how to set up service accounts and tokens for auth there. Is that what you wanted to know, Quentin?
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to know. And I presume, and I'm not super familiar with the existing multi-tenancy stuff we have, but I presume these tenants are kind of aware of the other tenants and can see other tenants' pods when they list them and stuff like that.
No, because all of the tenants get access to their namespaces. Part of the RBAC that we give them restricts them to just their namespace. The RBAC roles we give out give pretty much like a cluster admin access level, but to just their namespace. So we have like a cluster admin cluster role that we bind into just the namespace with a role binding. So then when you do that, you get admin access to all of the API, but only to the stuff that's scoped to your namespace. It's a very nice construct.
Cool. And do the tenants kind of interact with each other in any way, controlled ways? Do they like provide? Does one tenant provide services to another tenant, for example?
Right now, not yet. That is the plan. I see a question in the chat. So the hard one is only CI and only ever will be CI. Right now, the main use case for the soft one is also CI, but we have service workloads coming. And so we've needed to build everything to be able to do both of those. And so when the service workloads are coming, they will need to be able to, it's all going to be 12-factor apps. So the stateless workloads will be able to just need to be able to get to other services using the service construct. So another question in the chat. In the cluster role, we literally have a cluster admin one that provides most permissions available in the cluster, because we bind it into a namespace with a role binding, and we don't let people interact with the RBAC. So we do disable. There's like a namespace admin role. Sorry, we disable like RBAC objects and a few other things that we don't want people to be able to touch. But aside from that, they have reasonably unrestricted access inside their namespace. Yeah. Yes, the default admin role.
So it sounds like you've kind of got it all working with Kubernetes as it is today. Is there anything you would have wished was different when you were solving all of that stuff?
Yeah, I've been thinking pretty hard about that actually, and it's really the hard part at the moment. Really, is just understanding all the constructs and being able to wire them together. I think and making sure that you haven't missed any along the way. I think RBAC, once you get it, is really straightforward and all that sort of stuff. The pod security policies are kind of a set and forget thing. We found we've done the thing where you associate a restricted pod security policy with all service accounts by default. And so there's the restricted pod security policy stops people from getting most of the capabilities and privileged networking, privileged containers, all the sort of stuff that we want to make sure that nobody can do unless we really need to, gets restricted by the pod security policy. Sorry, there's another question about namespaces from the chat. They don't need to. So for their namespaces, when you choose a group, we solved a lot of the problems about naming and having people remember what they were connecting to using the LDAP. The LDAP group that you connect to has like the name of the role and the name of the namespace that you're using in the name of just a magic name in the LDAP group that we parse out. It's a bit hacky, but it actually has worked quite well so far. So the name of your LDAP group that you pick has, one of them will be like the team name and then the namespace name and the access level. So there's no listed namespaces for them to remember.
Sorry, I didn't understand.
No worries.
The names are auto-generated for the user, or can you explain that one more time? That's
fine.
Like one of the issues with the multi-tenant clusters is people can't pick arbitrary names because there could be collisions with, with other namespaces names that had been created. So it sounds like you're addressing that problem, but I wasn't completely clear on. Right now the way that we address that is that creating namespaces is a manual process. Somebody eyeballs the name of the namespace and make sure it doesn't collide. So people basically just log a ticket with us and say, hey, I want a namespace and I'd like it to be named this, and then we go and create the config so that the namespace creation will be consistent. And we say, hey, to do that, you need to make an LDAP group that has this name. And the name of the LDAP group includes the name of the namespace. And then once the people create that get that LDAP group created by our internal systems, then then we can wire the LDAP group together. Well, it'll just work with the LDAP group with Kube token to give you, when you connect to the cluster, it will give you, it will drop you into that namespace, or you will only be able to access that namespace. But the Kube token also will pre-configure your Kube config for you with all the clusters it knows about that have your namespace, and we provision all namespaces everywhere for given clusters. So that's how we sort of solve the namespace collision problem. Is it's all pretty manual. So I guess having something there that would help with the namespace creation would be good, but we don't anticipate right now when we have more stateless workloads like web actual service workloads coming, we will be having we have an internal team building like a PaaS layer that will run on top of Kube that people will talk to rather than talking to Kube directly. That PaaS layer will create namespaces for people, and that PaaS layer will handle making sure that the namespaces have unique names. Sorry, another question from the chat. For the LDAP integration, we don't. So the way that the LDAP integration work is that the Kube token actually will do the LDAP lookup, and then provide you with a certificate that has the name of the RBAC role you should assume in the certificate, and then we just drop that certificate into your Kube config directory. Thanks. And it'll do that. Yeah. So we did release it open source. Thanks to Dave Cheney for writing that while he was with us.
May I ask one question regarding the pod security policy? Is there a scenario within a single namespace, most of our workloads should be run unprivileged, but there may be some deployments in the namespace which require privileged workloads?
Yep.
Do you have a scenario like this?
Yeah. So obviously a whole lot of the stuff that we actually use for as the platform team needs to run privileged. Like we run Calico, obviously that needs privileged pods. There's a few other things that need privileged. We have another privileged PSP that to do that we can we can use a cluster role binding to bind the privileged PSP to any service account we want. So for so in a particular namespace, we'll say, oh, you really need privileged pods. Are you sure you really need privileged pods? Why do you need privileged pods? That's a terrible idea. You better have a really good use case. But if all of those bits get passed, then we just create another service account, bind the privileged PSP to that service account, and then say, okay, make sure that you use this service account for all of so that your pods end up actually using this service account in the end. Another question from Dole. We don't map non-namespace objects like storage class and PV. The use case for our clusters is we don't persist state inside the cluster at all. So no PVs, no storage class, no storage at all. Because we're running in AWS, we say if you want to persist state, persist it out to RDS or one of the other AWS primitives rather than keeping state in the cluster.
Does that mean they all have to manage their own secrets?
So for connection, for secrets, for like database connection strings and stuff like that. Yep. Yeah. So again, the main use case we see for this is in the eventual PaaS. The PaaS is going to use the service broker and open service broker APIs to then call out to a service that will generate you a RDS instance. The OSB will come back with the creds, which the service broker service will then set up secrets inside your namespace for you that then you can then consume. The PaaS tooling is intended to all wire this up for people so that if I'm a developer who wants to run a small web service, I just say, hey, I want an RDS, and it handles all of the details about the knobs that you want to turn on the RDS and wiring up the secrets for you and all that sort of stuff.
Just a quick question going back to the LDAP stuff. So does it also create the namespace and the policies in the cluster in addition? Does the kube token do that, or it just provisions and configures the kube config file, and then there's some other mechanism to sync the namespace and policies?
Yes, for the namespace and policies. So we've set all of the policies are all defaults, so for when we are the ones who configure the namespaces for people at the moment, because we don't anticipate. So again, this is in the soft multi-tenancy cluster. In the hard multi-tenancy cluster, the pipelines team who actually wrote the product originally, they were using Kubernetes before we were a team. And so they have an agent that they run inside the cluster that handles creating the namespace and scheduling the work and doing all that stuff for the end user. And that their agent is the only thing that touches the API that's not us inside that cluster, so that all of the users is just the agent and their team to check that the agent is running. So yeah, basically because we don't have a lot of automated automated requests and stuff like that for like named namespaces with the LDAP access, it's quite manual at the moment. We literally will make changes to our Ansible to make sure that the namespaces get pushed everywhere, and then they'll get pushed everywhere as we deploy that out to various clusters. Admins to users ratios. We've got, I think there's 8 of us in the team. Right now we've probably got, in terms of customers, we've got like 5 or 6, but the customers then have their own customers. So the number of actual users, I don't know, it's a bit hard to say. We run, I think, I can't remember the last time I looked, I think it was about 20 or 30,000 builds a day on the internal cluster. I can't remember what the pipelines clusters run, but it's probably more than that. yeah, but right now the services workload is pretty slim. We're pretty much only running our own stuff, but that is just starting to ramp up now.
So the configuration, just so I understand, so the configuration of the clusters in terms of the creating the namespaces and creating the policy objects is done by the Ansible.
Yes.
So I see.
Yeah. We just, I mean, that is again just a very simple templating exercise. We have the only config that we need to do really is to create the namespace and bind the correct role into the namespace, and that's it. Because we have the unprivileged pod security policy is bound to default to newly created service accounts by default, and so as long as we wire up the RBAC correctly, then that's all. There's only two things to do.
It sounded like network. You are also doing something with network policy because you mentioned Calico and that stuff at the beginning.
Yes,
network policy is per namespace. So do you also have to create that per namespace, or maybe I misunderstood?
So yeah, I think the network policy stuff are mainly. I can't remember exactly how that works. Sorry. We definitely don't need to create that per namespace for customers right now. I think we handle a lot of the per namespace stuff with Calico rules that are a little bit different to the network policy objects.
Calico has a global network policy, so you would set that if you wanted to say like no namespace can access the metadata service.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, man. The Ansible is not open source at the moment. Mainly just because we haven't done the process of going through to make 100% sure that we haven't put any secrets in there.
I think this might be relevant. So you mentioned that Helm wasn't going to work because of Tiller and namespaces and stuff. Could you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, sure.
We're in the middle of building and trying to build our tooling using Helm to do this, and I have been saying I don't think it's a very good idea. But
yeah, so it's been a little while since I checked, but I think the last update I saw on the tickets was that so Tiller needs to have a set of permissions to talk to the cluster. It doesn't support impersonation because that's still sort of not quite finished, I guess is the word. Because the Tiller can't sort of reauth the request that it's getting, it needs to have cluster admin access. And so you need to, for your Helm things to run, whoever is talking to Helm has cluster admin access. And there's no way, when I looked last time, there was no way for Tiller to say, hey, to take an RBAC, like a set of credentials, and then test that against the cluster. There were tickets open with Helm and Tiller about that, but the last I saw, they were like, "This is super hard. You should use a Tiller per namespace." I think was what I remember being the answer. But.
Yeah, that's the advice I've heard is that if you want it to be secure, run a Tiller per namespace for the reason you're mentioning.
Yeah, so that then you can bind the Tiller to a namespace scoped RBAC role and make sure that Tiller is not acting outside its namespace. Of course, if you want to use Tiller to provision, cluster-wide resources, then you'd have to run, some sort of admin Tiller that you would, again, and then you're sort of in the problem again.
Yeah, okay. We probably won't have that because it will be our tooling is the only thing that actually provisions anything. People interact with us with a pull request. So.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I get it. So we try to do so that our Ansible thing is all built so that we can operate via pull request internally within the team. It's just that, and the PAS team, also interact with us via pull requests on the Ansible config as well. I guess if anyone else has no other questions, that's me out of information to impart.
Thanks. That was great. Jess, are you still there? I don't want to like.
Oh yeah.
Take over or anything. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying that was other than the docs for reading for next week. Like, if anyone has something to discuss, they could do it now.
I was just going to. Is Quentin still here? What else do we need to do on the labels doc? What issues are unresolved that we want to resolve before we start talking about it? Because I thought it was a pretty interesting conversation, and there's a lot to talk about there already.
Yeah, I think we're just going to give more people time to look it over and read it, so that we could have the discussion with more people.
No, and I think there were some good comments in there about some like additions that could be made to the doc, like kind of making the use cases a little clearer and maybe also describing the alternatives, because like the way I saw it, it was proposing an alternative to some kind of hierarchy, some kind of like say namespace hierarchy, doing something more flexible through labels, but there wasn't a lot of discussion of like an alternative like hierarchical namespaces or something like that. So that was kind of what I was hoping to see a little more of, more of the cases and the alternative solutions.
Okay.
I don't know if Quentin is still there and has any comment, but my guess is that's the kind of thing he had in mind when he said that he wanted to make some more additions to the doc.
Is there anything else anyone wanted to discuss?
I wasn't there, so I'm not sure how relevant it was versus the doc on secure container isolation, but I hear that there was a lot of discussion or interesting discussion in that direction, maybe on the SIG node meeting this week. So it's on my to-do list at least to go back and watch the recording of that.
Oh yeah, I think Tim's here, but I was also in that meeting, and I think they were gonna circle back and go over it at the next SIG node in detail, but he did give an overview and stuff.
Yeah, I'm happy to kind of give a brief overview here if that would be useful. In SIG node, we mostly just covered kind of the high-level goals of the doc and talked a little about next steps, and a few people had some questions that I clarified. So.
Do you want to talk about it, Tim, or do you think people should just watch the video of the meeting, or what do you think?
I would say that hopefully the doc speaks for itself, particularly the kind of like goals section should give you kind of an understanding of what is written there. One thing that I've been kind of meaning to go back and add to is kind of what the next steps are. And I think that, it's this doc has sparked a lot of good conversations that we're going to kind of continue next week and in the comments section. But my hope is that, we can come up with like a one or multiple kind of proposals for an actual solution that meets all of the requirements, and then kind of run through everything, all the considerations and the requirements laid out in there, and kind of evaluate it in a more structured way than kind of the tossing out of arguments that we've been doing so far. And so then we'll have a follow-up with an actual solution proposal in of weeks Yeah, are there any questions on that? I can go into more detail, or folks can just take a look at it.
So next time we're discussing the labels doc and Tim's pod security doc. Is that right?
That sounds reasonable to me. I don't know.
Yeah, makes sense to me.
I'm also planning on discussing the isolation doc in SIGAuth and SIGNode next week. So I'm happy to talk about it here as well. But if you're interested in joining either of those conversations,
You're doing your worldwide tour.
yeah.
I don't know about Craig, but this time is definitely the best out of all of the SIG calls for me, as it's 6 o'clock in the morning instead of 1 o'clock in the morning.
In a couple of months, it'll be 4 a.m. So careful.
Yeah, the SIG off meets at the same time, just on the alternating weeks with the
Okay, yeah, cool.
that multi-tenancy working group. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't also discuss it here. But we kind of did that on purpose. Have this meeting alternate with the SIG off at the same time.
Yeah, so if that's all everyone had, we can give you back like 20 minutes. Cool. Okay.
Awesome. Thanks
Sounds
for
good.
the questions, everyone.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing all that information. That
Yeah.
was great.
Thanks.
No worries.
Bye.